For a long time, I've been writing regularly. I've written since I was small, right after I uttered my first word or crayoned a scribble. So says a voice in Seismosis, a 2006 recondite collaboration of text and drawings, a book whose text include many voices utilized by the poet in an act of self-ventriloquism, and my first encounter with the mind of John Keene. I had been acquainted with Keene's collaborator, Christopher Stackhouse, for a few years prior to the book's publication and wanted to support his work. My lesser-read insecurities made the book incomprehensible to me, but I was drawn to its smartness and wanted to be a part of the understanding that these two seemed to share. And the daring, thinking and wondering how to stutter poetry. Keene writes later in Mo Poesis, and later still, an interposition, as if I were to press the text to its limits in anamorphosis. Intimidating stuff for one who had only just begun to identify as a poet, but, as I stand here before you, a successful provocation. Straight A, nothing but a sissy boy who's scared to play, taunt the boys of Keene's childhood, or at least his narrator's childhood in annotations. The book is described on its cover as an experimental first novel of poem-like compression, though what sold this reader on Keene's debut was the discovery of an experimental poem in novel drag. And, like the best drag, you can't tell, even up close. It is a remarkable book not only for its codifying of a black gay coming of age that would have been so familiar to our ilk at the end of the last millennium, but for its replete expression of emotion and an imaginative way. Indeed, the book sings its own justification. Such expansive lyricism might be worthy of reprobation were not the very phenomenon of our lives a boundless source of poetry. It is retrograde to have allegiances, but I like them, and mine will always be to poetry, to the poetry I find in any text, no matter the genre. No introduction of Keene, however, would be effectuated without mentioning counter-narratives, a tour de force if ever there was one, and beautiful homage in scope and structure to Jorge Luis Borges' Ficciones. The stories therein offer readers the alter ego of Keene's lyricism, which is an intentional but benevolent disruption. The critic Daniel Green explains the author's use of history in the book as subjecting it to complication, revision, and reassessment. In a real respect, John Keene is the poet who lived. Sure, we tire of associations between gay men and the virus, but as one born 18 months before the epidemic began and spermacied in the age of antiretrovirals and a foreseeable cure treatment, secretly scouring the shelves for Dixon and Hemphill and Saint, who should still be here among us, the fact that Keene lives and is thriving despite the trifecta of risk is a cause to celebrate. The publication of Punks last year was a monumental culmination, the signaling of an era coming to a close. Poems like "Oh, Little Butch Queen, Don't Try It" will not be written anymore, as our Secret Ways and Argo meld into Emmy-winning primetime entertainment and corporate-sponsored conventions. Keene's distinction is cerebral. He's giving you ontic sass. Get it while you can.
So good evening to everyone. Let me see, I'll set my timer, make sure, okay. I'd like to begin by thanking Dante for that extraordinary introduction. Thank you so much. He's an amazing poet. and person in his own right. So please check out his work. Thank you also to Sharon Olds, and Omatara Jones, who's going to be introducing Sharon, Bernard Schwartz, Ricardo Maldonado, Sophie Heron, and everyone else at the 92nd Street Y who made this event and my participation in it possible. And I'll say this is a kind of mini reunion. When I was a graduate student at NYU, I never had the opportunity to study with Sharon Olds, but I would see her in the hallway, and she would always say, hello. So. So I'm going to read poems from Punks, and I will try to stay within the time limit. And so the first one I'm going to read is called A Report on What's American About American Poetry, Conference at the New School, which was a conference that took place in 2001. And so this is my rendering of what happened there. We're fed up with tolerance and writing about whores shooting up heroin. There are no poets of my generation waiting for something to rebel against. On 137th Street and 7th Avenue, a brother was crossing the street, said, a white silence which is metaphysical, and a black silence which is political and social. I am not suffering the language of power behind the poems, only ghosts of Charles Bernstein. He doesn't want to engage the book of Generation X. The beats have already done it, coming from deconstruction and all that French theory. When anyone appears to strike a pose, aren't you the sister who was reading Allen Ginsberg? I come from another context altogether. There is so much vitality there, as you can tell from my accent and shit, but really it's about living language, poetry. To give you another example, a children's game in France, songs and gestures are not our origins. Orpheus, I am mestizo, and went to Iowa reclaiming language from the seat of power. 2 white women just resigned, 2 black women who will not remain silent. Aren't you the sister was reading Allen Ginsberg? Can you say something about the history and how you feel this competition over anxieties infects us all? Or Janie, who knew from Hurston? It's a shame the organization sells only so many copies, and a heated discussion ensues because Eros is in there too. We are waiting to rebel against smart bombs and cynicism. Poems are mere ghosts of my generation. There's nothing left behind the words but fragments, rupture, burrows, and someone else that's new, beginning with Native Americans amidst the white middle class. Between the two silences, an accident can happen. A difference that never comes as a work of fiction. Only ghosts are silenced behind the poems with heroin and vernacular. But you are too young to be dropping bombs on Mesopotamia like hip-hop to be cynical of the world. You can change hearing Judy Grahn at a woman's gathering. Only one poem, though. Are there any studies overthrowing Allende? Erasing differences concerning the audience? We keep coming back to Pound and Eliot, to rebel against the street and jazz Africans in bondage. I think I break behind the poems, an East Coast thing. Only minstrels and whores are our precursors of cynicism. Don't read Generation X, but look for me. Ghosts, translate my absence into language. Speak to power behind the words. Rebel against the silence. Try to remember that South African man. Sometimes I try to remember the name of that South African man who insisted on being called colored, even though in this country he would have qualified as black. He was more attached to that identification than any other, such as older, dapper, tourist, uncut, speaks Afrikaans, wears glasses. His hair slipped under my fingers like lamb's wool. He could tongue longer than any guy I'd come across thus far. What did we talk about as we lay on the comforter in his hotel room, getting around Boston on foot? How we'd both considered studying architecture, apartheid over there, racism here, especially how black Americans had achieved so much in comparison, how we seemed to take everything for granted, back and forth. Imagine if just bitching about inadequate schools and lack of housing could land you at the bottom of a ditch, he asked me. But it happens here too, I protested. He smiled. Respect your elders, even if they're lovers. Be quiet now. And then his palm covered my mouth and nose, leaving only a tiny slit for me to breathe. This is how they held me before they began to beat me, he said. Then he rained down another round of kisses. Elegy, Boston. August, one of those evenings I walked a long way home over the Harvard Bridge, your image dissolving sweetly like a lozenge on my tongue. This friendship, I reminded myself, is everything but wrong. In like with, but not in love with, you. I already had somebody. What else is there to do? Suffer and let the river air it out. Like a spectator, I hovered at the balustrade, waiting for an early evening regatta, bright sails, black keels cutting beneath the railing, turning me from my yearning, stealing my reeling mind. Below, breezes herringbone the rusty water, rush hour traffic nodded behind me at the center of the bridge. These and other observations I jotted in my journal, remembering your dark fingers around my own, like riggings, our calls, brief torrents anchoring my afternoons. Can I think through your absence now in words as ungainly as these? Institute, 364.4 smoots, abandoned bandshell, deleted emails, KS, a cyclovir. That night I stalled, not wanting to reach Boylston, buy books and wine and candy and circle like a gull above feeling. I stood there, as I sit here now, watching the red brick beacons beckoning, dimming, like all desires, and lost itself to mere horizon. Okay, let's see. So one of the wonderful experiences I had was going to Cave Canem. And one of the great things about Cave, it's an amazing organization, an amazing experience. It was like a third education outside of the university and my experience with the darkroom. And one of the things that you do is you write a poem every day. So, some of the poems are just horrible. Some of the poems come out, right? This was a poem that pretty much came out without a problem. Night Tea. What remains? Fragrance of autumn leaves your breath. At dawn, we could not stop talking. I could not stop tracing the black waves of your hips, your thighs, soft as sighs under my fingers. Could not your lips before mine cover them again. Stop talking, words falling onto your back. What was not said comes back. Some of the poems, there are a group of poems in this collection that were collaborations with a late poet, Cynthia Gray, Cindy Lore, and I was very fortunate her parents consented to allow the poems to appear in this collection. We never met in person, we communicated by email, but we wrote a series of poems together, which was a really fun experience. And then when my publisher, we were putting together the book, The Song Cave, been absolutely fantastic. They agreed. They said, yep, we think they'll work. So they figured out where they would work, and so they're in the book. So here's Song. This is a collaborative poem. Song. The song alight in the evening light is jasmine white notes like cashmere extending from the fountain seven curved. The grass still gleaming in the mind's new darkness, cypresses shoulders upon the paths and benches where my body sits with its decompositions. I press myself against the splintering of wood, my lungs barely gathering each breath of mud feathered through leaves. I am keeping watch on the mosses and ferns gently bleeding, and sleeves of silver and green from the walls of shadows and moon. I breathe in the night air swollen with time and work and hopes and losses so subtle they never form. I settle myself in this dovecote of wood and meadow to hear each note of the sodden leaves and sever all thoughts. I cannot speak as sighs as bright as jasmine, a note or two breaking softly as they flee my throat and take rhythm and flight. Okay. Here is a poem. Let me see how I'm doing with time here. Okay. Here's a poem I don't think I've ever read publicly, so I'll read it, I think, for the first time. It's called Underground. And this is a poem that I wrote, and when I asked the editor if it was what he thought, I said, here's a poem I wrote. I don't know if it's going to fit. And I sent it, and he sent it to him, and he said, "Oh no, it's got to go in here." So sometimes you as a poet don't even know. Okay, underground. The squealing like underground. The squealing like someone's baby as cars invade the street. I'm listening to a song, but I can barely hear myself listening. Sirens. Suddenly, the world is suffering a metabolic disorder. What are you writing about? Nothing and everything at once. The cry the wheels make as they begin to break. So many songs like a gathering shouting. Young men scampering down the street. Crossroads. That was a song I sang often in childhood. I am listening, but I can barely hear you. I was originally thinking about the weather. I was originally thinking about what happened. I was originally thinking about the dead, head on head. When it hits, it rends the flesh. Listen. They're gathering along the sidewalk as the gunshots go off, writing, waiting. The ricochet pulls a tripwire in my throat. Often when I hear the cries, I wipe my eyes, but the tears keep flowing until they could fill a small bay. People screaming along the asphalt, their brother prone and groping, his death in his hands. No one wants to let him die. Oh, my people, bear witness. Look, the blues sweating through the phones recording. What is the name of that song? Our nothingness, everything at once. Underground. Angels of death gliding back into their cars wherever they disappear to, wailing, waiting. What are you writing? Whatever lies on the other side of that horror. On the other side of this weeping is a world built of blood. One for sorrow, two for mirth. They are gathering on the pavement with drums in their hands, the rhythm that makes ghosts dance. Nothing on the channel as they start to scream. The art lies in never forgetting. Waiting, exhaling. Often in the darkness we can see ourselves, scars. I know a song that is written in blood. Sing it, squealing louder to the whole world louder so the whole world can hear us. When it hits, it rends the soul. What are you writing? About a system underwritten in blood. Speak the livelong day. Men in masks emerged from the vans, holding their breath as if underwater. Life at the end of the world. Waiting, exhaling. There was no gun on the ground beside him. Train your eyes on the black space behind them. I am not dreaming, but listening. Can you hear me? Whether you can even remember the weather, whether you can even remember what happened, whether you can even remember the dead. I have no more tears, so I offer my skin. The men crying out as they begin to break, a song we sing whenever we meet. What are you writing about? A system underwritten with our blood. Everyone is speaking, so we listen. Everything and nothing at once. The sky as the day begins to break. People still marching down the street. Crossroads, heart on heart. The art lies in the fight and the scars. This is the sound of the weather that we live in. Life at the end of the beginning of the world. A song we sing as hard as we live. Listen. Let's see. And just a few more. Okay. This one is called Pulse. And I said, when the Pulse tragedy happened, I wanted to write something. And so I tried to write a poem, and it was terrible. And I wrote a blog post to kind of express my feelings. And then several years later, this poem came to me. So Pulse, for the 49 murdered and 53 wounded at the Pulse nightclub, Orlando, Florida, June 12, 2016. We're the quiet street, hours before doors open. We're the first words and the parting ones. We're the cologne and perfume selected for tonight alone. We're the fragrance of soap, Vaseline, shea butter. We're the pressed polos and tees, the freshly laced kicks. We're the pants just out of the dryer, the sweater that fits. We're the glances, the stares, the winks. We're the close cut, the Caesar and tight fade. We're the crucifix beads and cowrie shells. We're the knockoff watch and the 14-karat chain. We are the cordon and the gathering line. We are the sachet and the strut and the swagger. We are the foundation, mascara and blush. We are the eye blink, the heartbeat, the hush. We are the oil glistening in locks, ponytails, and froze. We are the piercings from eyebrows to tongues to noses. We are the mouth spray, the breath mints, the gum. We are the bustier, the suspenders, the garters. We are the shades that never come off. We are the pocket scrapper, the rolling paper packet. We are the X, the weed, the snowy trail. We are the bitter beer, fizzy soda, and sweet cocktail. We are the chairs rearranged to open the door. We are the sweaty brows, the half-hidden tears. We are the gleam of smartphone screens. We are the small talk, the banter, the laughter. We are the clap and the claps and the clapbacks. We are the wigs on too tight or just right. We are the improvised steps, the smoothest moves. We are the dances that precede the groove. We are the cruise stare and icy glare. We are the kikis and air kisses and shade. We are the gossip that cannot wait to be told. We are the static, bass, and reverb. We are the heat rising off of bodies, nearing, touching. We are the beat that slides beneath the beat. We are the fallen lash, the broken heel, the belt cinched tight. We are the proposal for a lifetime, a few minutes, or the night. We are the breath held till the evening climaxes. We are the closing doors, the bolted locks. We are the silence that always remembers. We are the song that never ends. And just two more. This one is called Words. Get a drink of water. And I was telling someone about this poem, and it was actually, the idea came from me as I was at a poetry reading, a very great experimental poetry reading at the Red Rover poetry series in Chicago at Outer Space Studios. And I heard people not basically saying that what's in this poem, but of course it was a wonderful spur. So please go to poetry readings to all the poets out there. Readings of all kinds of arts events. Words. When you said people, did you mean punish? When you said friend, did you mean fraud? When you said thought, did you mean terror? When you said connection, did you mean con? When you said God, did you mean greed? When you said faith, did you mean fanatic? When you said hope, did you mean hype? When you said unity, did you mean enmity? When you said freedom, did you mean forfeit? When you said law, did you mean lie? When you said truth, did you mean treason? When you said feeling, did you mean fool? When you said together, did you mean token? When you said desire, did you mean desert? When you said sex, did you mean savagery? When you said need, did you mean not? When you said blood, did you mean bought? When you said heart, did you mean hard? When you said head, did you mean hide? When you said health, did you mean hurt? When you said love, did you mean loss? When you said fate, did you mean fight? When you said destiny, did you mean decimate? When you said honor, did you mean hunger? When you said bread, did you mean broke? When you said feast, did you mean fast? When you said first, did you mean forgotten? When you said last, did you mean least? When you said woman, did you mean wither? When you said man, did you mean master? When you said mother, did you mean smother? When you said father, did you mean fatal? When you said sister, did you mean surrender? When you said brother, did you mean brutal? When you said fellow, did you mean follow? When you said couple, did you mean capital? When you said family, did you mean failure? When you said mankind, did you mean market? When you said society, did you mean sickness? When you said democracy, did you mean indignity? When you said equality, did you mean empty? When you said politics, did you mean power? When you said left, did you mean lost? When you said right, did you mean might? When you said republic, did you mean rich? When you said wealthy, did you mean wall? When you said poor, did you mean prison? When you said justice, did you mean just us? When you said immigrant, did you mean enemy? When you said refugee, did you mean refusal? When you said earth, did you mean ownership? When you said soil, did you mean oil? When you said community, did you mean conflict? When you said safety, did you mean suspicion? When you said security, did you mean sabotage? When you said army, did you mean Armageddon? When you said white, did you mean welcome? When you said black, did you mean back? When you said yellow, did you mean yield? When you said brown, did you mean down? When you said we, did you mean war? When you said you, did you mean useless? When you said she, did you mean suffer? When you said he, did you mean horror? When you said they, did you mean threat? When you said I, did you mean island? When you said tribe, did you mean trouble? When you said name, did you mean nobody? When you said news, did you mean nonsense? When you said media, did you mean miasma? When you said success, did you mean sucker? When you said fame, did you mean game? When you said ideal, did you mean idol? When you said yesterday, did you mean travesty? When you said today, did you mean doomsday? When you said tomorrow, did you mean never? When you said here, did you mean hush? When you said listen, did you mean limit? When you said right, did you mean wound? When you said read, did you mean retreat? When you said literacy, did you mean apathy? When you said fiction, did you mean forget? When you said poetry, did you mean passivity? When you say art, do you mean act? And I'll end with a short poem. I'm right at time. And this is called Beatitude. This is a different spirit, but similar poem, litany. Right? Beatitude. Love everything. Love the sky and sea, trees and rivers, mountains and abysses. Love animals, and not just because you are one. Love your parents and your children, even if you have none. Love your spouse or partner no matter what either word means to you. Love until you create a cavern in your loving, until it seethes like a volcano. Love every time. Love your enemies. Love the enemies of your enemies. Love those whose very idea of love is hate. Love the liars and the fakes. Love the tattletales and the cowards. Love the hypocrites and hypocrites, the hucksters and the traitors. Love the thieves because everyone has thought of stealing something at least once. Love the rich who love only to empty your purse or wallet. Love the poverty of your empty coin purse or wallet. Love your piss and sweat and shit. Love your and others' chatter, and it's proof of the expansiveness of nothingness. Love your shadows and their silent censure. Love your fears, yesterdays and tomorrows. Love your yesterdays and tomorrows. Love your beginning and your end. Love the fact that your end is another beginning or could be for someone else. Love yourself, but not too much that you cannot love everything and everyone else. Love everywhere. Love in the absence of love. Love the monsters breeding in every corner of every city and suburb, all throughout the soil of the countryside. Love the monster breeding inside you and slaughter him with love. Love the shipwreck of your body, your mind's salted garden. Love, love. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, John Keene, for blessing us with not just your poems, but your presence. Thank you. What more can we ask for? Hello. My name is Omatara James, and it is my great honor to introduce Sharon Olds tonight. I had the distinct pleasure of taking a workshop with Sharon through the creative writing program at NYU, or New York University, in the spring of 2018. It was the best workshop of my life. It was the most challenging workshop of my life. I learned a lot about duality. Sharon's workshop provided for me what Sharon's poems most generously provide: a space for possibility and inquiry. The intelligence of her poetry possesses this capacity. In Sharon's latest collection of poems, ballads, Sharon provides us with, quote, the peace of telling each other the truth. Her poems risk it all. Bell Hooks tells us the practice of love offers no space of safety. We risk loss, hurt, pain. We risk being acted upon by forces outside of our control. Sharon's long catalog of work captures the meditative principle of duality, which holds space for both the craft of urgent truth-telling alongside rigorous generosity. Whether Olds composes a song of elegy, a song for the last moments of the centipede, or for the aging body. Quote, my equipment for staying alive is wearing out, end quote. Ballads doesn't deny the reader the meat of the mercurial moment. It unapologetically extends every note. Sharon Olds is an architect, a world builder, and a mother. No matter the state of my head or heart prior to entering one of Sharon's workshops, the welcoming lilt of her voice always put me at ease, steadying me in the preparation to think boldly, make decisions within my poems, and to connect me consciously to my emotional intelligence. To enter a room with Sharon Olds, be it a physical room or the room of the stanza, is an invitation to the present moment. Quote, as if against the rush of time, back to when love was being invented, before we spoiled the conditions for its existence: land, fire, air, and water, end quote. No matter the action of a Sharon Olds poem, even if you're isolated alongside the speaker inside a quarantine cabin, you long to remain there. So why does Sharon Olds remain one of our most relevant contemporary poets after all this time? In The Art of Daring, Carl Phillips writes, I think it's largely the conundrum of being human that makes us keep making. Philip continues, I think it has something to do with revision, how not only is the world in constant revision, but each of us is as well. Olds writes in ballads, I'm in the habit of telling a story over and over. The variety of decorated poetry collections that span the entirety of her illustrious career attest to the fact that there is an art to repetition, reflection, and revision. And it begins with listening. During our workshop sessions, Sharon would impress upon us the importance of attention in listening. When a student presents their work, we experience it twice. First, with our ears, then with our eyes, holding space for both the music first, then the form. And Sharon Olds is a formulist. I will end with a personal anecdote. So lastly, this is something I don't often share, but I was waitlisted for NYU. And when I applied with a friend. They got in, and I was waitlisted. And then they decided to decline their admission. And then I got in. I had always secretly harbored a doubt that perhaps I wasn't really good enough to be at NYU. Then one day during office hours with Sharon, I was asking probably too many questions, question after question. And without prompting very spontaneously, Sharon recalled my application materials and said, "Did you write that poem?" And you can imagine there are hundreds of people who apply. And she spontaneously recalled my admission. And I said, "Yes, I did." And then it was on that day that you gave me the best compliment of my life. You said, "Yes, I remember reading that poem. That poem made me want to be a better writer." Can you imagine? Someone who's won the Guggenheim, the Pulitzer Prize, et cetera, conjuring the generosity to say something like that to a student who presented as unsure, doubtful, and unsteady. Well, this is Sharon Olds. Quote, "Love is the love of who we are. It is a form of knowing." I don't know how, but somehow Sharon usually knows. Please welcome Sharon Olds.
I'm as afraid as I am honored, and I am more grateful than anything. And of course, what I experienced in Omatara's poems and presence and sharing of responses to others' poems was and is the integrity and intelligence and just the gift, the sheer gift that she was born with and that she's been caring for. And I have some hope about the earth and the world now. I've been paying a little attention to the young writers. And it's not for me to fail to have hope when they are doing what they're doing. And also, that was amazing. I've never heard you read before. That was amazing. Thank you. It changed me. I thought of counterpoint, I thought of jazz dancing, the way in which the words came and the spaces between the words, everything like both improvised and known, deeply known. Thank you. Thank you. So now we kind of go backwards in time. In terms of me being so lucky as to be alive and writing, and not able to have known what would be done next. And so I'm always asking to go first. The past, the present, the future. But I'm honored to be up here at all. Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. None of them are good enough, but I'm going to start with this one. And I had a fondness for this poem because it was trying to pay as much attention to my own experience, which often is old-fashioned and often ignorant. When I grew up, there was so much that, I had no knowledge of, no way of knowing. And so I want to read this poem, which was conceived as a love poem. And of course, I grew up in a world that is so unimaginative about each individual of us, and however many people are in this room, that is the number of genders that are in this room. I feel so lucky to be learning and learning. And so this is a little retro. But I want to see what it feels like. I almost feel, having just been at the Dodge Festival for 4 days, I almost feel that when I'm with the poets, I'm safe in some way. I'm a very fearful person, but I feel that we love each other. Ode of Girls' Things. I loved the things that were ours. Pink gloves. I know this is old-fashioned. I loved the things that were, how's the sound? Yeah, thank you. I loved the things that were ours. Pink gloves, hankies with a pastoral scene in one corner. There was a lot we were not allowed to do, but what we were allowed to do was ours. Dolls you carry by the leg, and dolls' clothes you would put on or take off. Someone who was yours, who did not have the right of her own nakedness, and who had a smooth body with its untouchable place, which you would never touch even on her. You had been cured of that. And some of the dolls had hard rubber hands with dimples, and though you were not supposed to, you could bite off the ends of the fingers when you could not stand it. And though you'd never be allowed to, say, drive a bus or do anything that had to be done right, there was a teeny carton in you of eggs so minute they were invisible. And there would be milk in you too, real milk. And you could wear a skirt. You could be a bellflower up under its cone, the complex shape like a closed buckle, intricate groove and tongue, where something like God's power over you lived. And it turned out you shared some things with boys. The alphabet was not just theirs. And you could make forays over into their territory. You could have what you could have because it was yours, and a little of what was theirs because you took it. Much later, you'd have to give things up, too, to make it fair. Long hair, skirts, even breasts, a pair of raspberry-colored pumps which a friend wanted to put on if they would fit his foot, and they did. I'd like to read the first poem in arias. You know how it goes? It goes this kind of a cover, this kind of a cover, bam, woo! The wonderful Northwest poet Mike McGriff says that every time he sees this, I sent him a copy, he thinks it's called Badass. I like that. I mean, imagine such self-haters as so many of us are, most of us, I fear, certainly me. I forget what I was going to say, but it's kind of wonderful to trust each other and take pleasure in whatever we can take pleasure in that does not take pleasure away from someone else. So I would like to read first the first poem in Arias. For you. In the morning, when I'm pouring the hot milk into the coffee, I put the side of my face near the convex pitcher to watch the last round drop from the spout, and it feels like being cheek to cheek with a baby. Sometimes the orb pops back up, a ball of cream balanced on a whale's watery exhale. Then I gathered the tools of my craft, the cherry sounding board tray for my lap, like the writing arm of a desk, the phone, the bird book for looking up the purple martin. I repeat them as I seek them so as not to forget. Tray, cell, phone, purple martin, tray, phone, Martin, Trayvon, Martin. Song was invented for you. All art was made for you. Painting, writing was yours, our youngest, our most precious, to remind us to shield you. All was yours. All that is left on earth with your body was for you. I've been granted to enter a dialogue about this poem. The question being whether white writers turn martyrs who are black into some kind of God figure. Like in the movie when the black detective is, walking along and you want to say from your seat, look out, you're not safe in this movie. We know how these movies tend to go. So I am open, thanks to a poet in the program at NYU, to the possibility that though I had never thought of that when I wrote the poem, and one could say, how could I am now open to rewriting it or saying goodbye to it, putting it in a drawer. But it's still an open dialogue for me with Victoria. So I wanted to read it, but to mention that I don't trust it the way I did. I've never given a reading where I was just so knocked kindly sideways, so that I don't know what to do. I'll read this poem from Ballads, which is called My Hand. A lot of the poems in the beginning of this book are quarantine poems. I spent 2 years mostly by myself, always by myself, during my kids wanted me to go to the woods. I wanted to be in New York City with my mask on. They wanted it, so I did. And then a lot of different kind of poems came out. Of course, most of my different kind of poems comes out because of the Monday Poets. Hi, Major. We're two of the 7 or 8 Monday poets. We Zoom and give each other words and write poems like right then, and then read them to each other. Oh. My hand. When I look at my hand and at the back of my wrist, gleaming with the petrolatum which I've rubbed into its chap, mineral oil, Sarazin, lanolin, panthenol, glycerin, bisabolol. I see the fine wrinkles, many making diamond shapes, some of them long cicatrice wobbles. It looks touching to me and lucky. And I like the veins which bulge up from the back of my hand. I'm a member of a couple. My partner is in a linen shift, a pine box, a New Hampshire earth, sacred in the Jewish cemetery. I say to you, Carl, my darling, it's okay your tissue will melt with the dirt when spring comes. It's okay, you cannot change the shock shape of your body I love. You are innocent of death. You are good. We are a couple. Remember when I climbed into your narrow hospice bed when you could hardly move, and as soon as I fitted myself in along you like the last piece of a puzzle, we both passed out into sleep. When I drove north, out of a city of plague, my car, your car which you sold me for the list price, was packed with notebooks in which our stories are held, balanced in their slow dance up and down and up. My epidermis looks pretty to me tonight, frail and real, like rills in sand which water rippled. I like to talk with you about the golden crown the internet rabbi said you would be wearing after death at the feast. And I love now seeing in the web of my glistening wrist skin that I am already part with thee. Tender and permanent is the night. I'm going to need help with time. Do you know about time? Anyone here? It would like 5 more minutes be good? Okay. I do like to go back to this poem in Stag's Leap. This is a book of the end of a long marriage, end by divorce of a long marriage. And it's called Known to be Left. If I pass a mirror, I turn away. I do not want to look at her, and she does not want to be seen. Sometimes I don't see exactly how to go on doing this. Often, when I feel that way, within a few minutes I am crying, remembering his body or an area of it, his backside often, a part of him just right now to think of, luscious, not too detailed, and his back turned to me. After tears, the chest is less sore, as if some goddess of humanness within us has caressed us with a gush of tenderness. I guess that's how people go on, without knowing how. I am so ashamed before my friends to be known to be left by the one who supposedly knew me best. Each hour is a room of shame, and I am swimming, holding my head up, smiling, joking, ashamed, like being naked with the clothed, or being a child, having to try to behave while hating the terms of your life. In me now, there's a being of sheer hate, like an angel of hate. On the badminton lawn, she got her one shot, pure as an arrow, while through the eyelets of my blouse the no-see-ums bit the flesh no one seems now to care to touch. In the mirror, the torso looks like a pin-up hives martyr, or a cream pitcher speckled with henbit and pussy paws, full of the milk of human kindness and unkindness, and no one is lining up to drink. But look, I'm starting to give him up. I believe he is not coming back. Something has died inside me, believing that, like the death of a crone in one twin bed as a child is born in the other. Have faith, old heart. What is living anyway but dying? So that poem was written in 97, and the hand was written within the last year. Yeah. And maybe I'll read a ballad that really is a ballad, sort of. Yes. I'm very grateful to be tossed about like in a ship on the water with the swells and the waves and the deep seas with all those fine molecules of salt and sugar. Yeah, Best Friend Ballad. Best Friend Ballad is on 67. Okay. Yeah, I started writing in quatrains for the first time since I was 15 when I first read Emily Dickinson, so that's why it's called ballads. And I'll close with one of those ballads and maybe one other poem. Depending, I'm just becoming one of those wild creatures who gets up here and it's not easy to get me back down. Best Friend Ballad. Sometimes I'll suddenly remember the power of her house and of the approach to it, down the narrow, extreme curve to the right street, opening onto the somehow delicate cul-de-sac, my best friend's house. What? Italianate, ogive windows, balconies, tile roof, Berkeley, California. The land fallen off steep behind it to the gradual slope to the bay, and then the flat stones up to her Doric portico, between them flowering weeds, no ice plant, no ivy, just tiny blossoms. Then there it was, like a villa, a little Berkeley palace, a doctor's elegant home of safety, where she was dying, 9 years old, and I didn't let myself realize it. If her mother had been there, maybe I could have asked her if I could take a nap with my friend when she fell asleep. But her mother had died the day before. My job was not to let my friend know it, so she could die as if she had a mother. What would I have given to have been allowed to lie down next to her dear skeletal body? She still had her fine yellow-green, thick, sour color hair, as if the lead poison they'd breathed had sharpened the chartreuse of it. What would I have given to be allowed to fall asleep with her and dream alive? What would I give now? Nothing. I have nothing to give, none of the luck which followed in my fortunate life. But I pray for a sleep tonight in which 9 and 9 we can hold each other in a green dream. I am so grateful to poetry and to the companionship of our fellow writers that we can realize now, late, or for some of you, not so late, what we want, what we wanted, what we wished to have and wished to give. And I'll close with Langston Hughes' poem, Luck. Sometimes a crumb falls from the table of joy. Sometimes a bone is flung. To some people, love is given. To others, only heaven. Thank you.